REBA has recently released our second financial wellbeing research project in association with Wealth at Work. This year's findings explore the impact of the cost of living crisis on financial wellbeing, as well as exploring employers' strategy plans, drivers of change, and trends within the workforce. If you'd like a copy of this report, full of insights and relevant data, you'll find a link at the end of this video. To discuss the findings, I'm joined today by Jonathan Watts-Ley, Director, Wealth at Work. We're going to talk about how employers are responding to employees' needs in their approach to financial wellbeing and what their focus could be for the future. While you're watching this video, if you'd like to jump ahead to specific topics in our discussion, you can see the chapters on screen or click the video timeline below. Jonathan, our findings showed that employers are moving from a tactical to a more strategic approach to financial wellbeing, with 74% saying they'll look to create a more joined-up approach to financial wellbeing benefits within the next 2 years. Why do you think that's happening now?
I think there's probably a number of reasons. I think that the first one, and probably the most obvious one, is the cost of living crisis. And so this would have impacted many employees in many organisations. And of course, it's quite hard we can generalise about some of the issues, but it's quite hard to understand it at a personal level, because ultimately everybody has their own personal inflation rate depending on their earnings and where their earnings are going and where that expenditure is. But I think it's really highlighted to firms that they need to have some sort of policy that's in place that can really help people to manage their money and their budgets better. And I think that in a way the cost of living crisis may be that the catalyst for organizations to think about this in a more strategic way. But even once the cost of living crisis has passed, I think it will still have an important role to play, because we know that people get into debt. We know people mismanage money. Arguably, sometimes when times are good and they're feeling very confident, they do actually overspend, and then they can get into trouble. So I think that's probably the first area. I think another area is the aging population. So of course that's reflected in a lot of organizations where they will have an aging employee workforce. And I guess the issues there are around people's ability to afford to be able to retire. Now, some may have taken a step back in terms of their savings because, for example, they may have been on furlough during COVID, or perhaps their pension fund just hasn't performed as well as they had hoped, given the volatility in the markets. So this could result in people needing to work longer in order to build up those pots so they can afford to retire. And I think that has quite a strategic perspective for employers as well, because of course for some organizations, employees working longer, perhaps longer than they otherwise may have done, may be seen as a good thing in times of labour shortages. They may actually want to keep those workers on longer if they're willing to do so. So for them, it may be a positive. But for other organisations, they may say, well, actually, we've got a very aging workforce and we need to bring in people with new skill sets, etc. So for them, it could be more of an issue. So I think there are some real strategic implications to it. I think the third and final point that I would raise is really around ESG. So ESG is something which is on the agenda of most organizations these days. And if I pick out the S, the social from ESG, which is really around your community and your customers, but also, of course, your staff as well. So one of the important, again, strategic pieces to think about is that if you are putting in place an ESG strategy, then you do need to think about your staff as under the S within ESG, and how you're going to ensure that those individuals have good financial well-being.
Thanks, Jonathan. And I think we also found that employers intend to introduce a wider range of benefits to support employees, with savings products and salary advance and other things such as share plans all showing growth. And interestingly, a small fall in those that said they're going to offer pension savings above auto enrolment minimums. What do you think is driving some of those changes?
Yeah, again, I think there's more awareness now that actually maybe more services need to be put in place to support the financial well-being of a workforce. I guess the first stage of that is ensuring that there is good financial education, so employees understand the things that they need to think about, and they also understand ways they can manage their money better. Now, the introduction of products is interesting, So I think in the savings sphere, which I know the research showed a big uptick in terms of employers who thought they would put more savings products in place. I guess you can understand that, because one of the issues we have at the moment is the lack of savings with a lot of employees. So anything that can be done to try and build more of a savings habit seems like a good thing. And I think with those savings products, it's looking at it over the short, medium, and long term for the individual. So short-term savings, which from a financial planning perspective you would probably say is less than 5 years, then having something like, for example, a save as you earn scheme, which is effectively cash. If that's a 3 or 5 year scheme, then it means that if people are saving into that, they can get the cash back after 3 or 5 years. Or indeed, if the shares price is above the strike price for that scheme, then they could buy the shares and make more money. But the point is, they will get their money back. Medium term, maybe things like a corporate equity ISA, and we've certainly seen more and more interest in those. So I think that's an area that is likely to continue. And then, of course, long term, you have pensions. So whilst, as you say, in the research it showed a slight dip there, clearly pensions, just from a regulatory perspective, if nothing else, I think will always be a cornerstone of savings product. I think when it comes to other products, so debt type products and salary advance type products, then again, this is where financial education has a key role, because those products undoubtedly have a place, but it's important that employees understand those. So, for example, when you look at salary advance, I think is a good thing if it's to pay a one-off cost. So, an example might be, the car breaks down, you need to fix the car. If you can't fix the car, you can't get to work. If you can't get to work, then you don't earn any money. So you might say, well, if you can get a salary advance to fix the car and get to work, then that makes financial sense. My concern would be that people that start using it as an ongoing facility month after month, because then, of course, if they're started to pay for, if you like, everyday goods, so that the shopping bill, for example, there are fees attached to these products, and so ultimately you're getting in a worse position, not a better position. And again, this goes back to employers thinking strategically. So one thing that they might want to think about is, if it's about getting people paid earlier, and a lot of organizations will pay, if they're paying monthly salary, they will pay towards the end of the month. So what an employer could do is say, well, actually, we'll change our payday to, say, the 15th of the month. So for those that are monthly paid, they're being paid in the middle of the month for the whole month. So that might be a much more economical way and much more efficient way to ensure that employees have money a bit earlier in the month. Now, there's a cost for the employer in that, because, of course, on the first month, they're bringing forward by, let's say, call it 2 weeks, their payroll. But that's a one-off, which is why I think it is a strategic decision to make.
So we also saw that half of employers said that they will spend more on financial well-being, and only 3% said that they'd actually intend to reduce their spend. But we've seen some enduring challenges this year from our 2022 report, such as continued concerns over financial literacy. And particular employee groups, as you mentioned earlier, aging workers, for example, are getting greater attention. Where do you think employers need to focus to address some of those challenges?
Yeah, so I think the key piece is around what services they're going to put in place to support those employees. I guess historically there's been a lot of debate about actually what is the delivery mechanism. So is it a website? Is it digital tools? Is it financial advice? Is it financial guidance or coaching? And I think one of the issues is that, again, historically it's been quite a tactical approach to it. So rather than standing back and saying, well, let's look at the workforce, and then let's come up with a strategy that will actually play to what our employees need, it's been a bit of sort of ad hoc one-off. So I would say, high level, people or employers need to think about how they're going to deliver financial education in whatever form that may take. So is it digital? Is it face to face? Is it a combination of all? Financial coaching, we know, or guidance in the research has seen a massive increase. I think employers were saying, or the number of employers saying that they were going to put that in place is growing from about 12% to 41%. And then, of course, there is the role of regulated advice, and particularly when you're talking about that aging workforce, and when people get to retirement, actually more of those may benefit from regulated advice. So one of the ways I think is often a way to think about this. I talk about a digital sandwich. So when you look at your various employee segments, that you may actually go out to them with digital nudges, for example. But when you've done those digital nudges, it may need some in-person support. So that could be, for example, coaching. But then once you've done that, it could be then there's more digital support in terms of tools, etc. So once people understand what they need to be looking at and they know which personal numbers they should be gathering in order to put into those tools, then that's helpful. So that's another way that organizations can start thinking about it a little bit more strategically.
And then I guess if we look at some of the other trends that we saw coming through as well, they tend to be focused on wider issues such as employee engagement and fairness. And we saw employers using techniques such as employee networks to help with this. And we're also seeing a real growing focus on data, and that echoes trends that we've seen elsewhere in employee benefits. But when it comes to financial wellbeing specifically, what are some of the core areas that resonated with you in the report, and what you think will be important for the future?
Yeah, I think the segmentation of the workforce is really important. Now, how personalized that can become to an individual employee clearly does depend on data. So if it's something that's closely related, let's say, to the benefits that that employer is offering, then actually a lot of that segmentation can actually get down to a personal level, and messages can be sent out that are relevant to those individuals. But of course, you're not going to have, as an employer, you're not going to have data covering all financial well-being issues. Probably the most obvious example is something like debt. As an employer, you're very unlikely to know at a personal level what debt issues an employee may have. So because of that, again, the best way probably to think about it strategically is to think about push and pull strategies. So where you have data, or even if not on an individual level, maybe at a segmented level. So again, if we go back to the aging workforce, then clearly there are messages you might send out to people, let's say in their 50s and above, that you wouldn't send to people that were in their 20s. So again, you on a segmented basis, you can send out relatively targeted messages. So that is a push strategy. That's where the employer is saying, right, I've identified either individuals or I've identified segments, and I'm going to push certain messages out to those groups and individuals. A pull strategy is where you don't really have that data. So again, going back to my debt example, you may want your employees to know that there are services that you have put in place as an employer to support them if they're worried about debt. But of course, they need to pull that. So actually, what you need to do is run good engagement, good awareness campaigns, show what's on offer, whether that be personalised coaching or digital tools, or even handoffs to third parties. But that is then for the individual to pull, because of course you as an employer will not know their personal situation.
So thanks so much for joining me today, Jonathan, and it's been a real insight into some of the trends and future directions that we're seeing for financial wellbeing. And if you'd like a copy of this REBA and Wealth at Work report, we've included the link at the end of this video. Thank you for joining us today.